No one in that chamber expected the next sentence to change the entire tone of the hearing. But the moment Jasmine Crockett opened her mouth, the atmosphere snapped from routine tension to something electric. Cameras clicked in uneven bursts, reporters leaned forward as if pulled by a string, and the low hum of murmurs swelled beneath the vaulted ceiling. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Each word slid into the room with a precision that made even her critics stop pretending not to listen. She spoke like someone who had carried truth through storms, someone who refused to let the weight of the moment crush her composure. Across the room, James Comer sat back with his arms crossed, his expression locked in the usual skepticism that had become his armor. He looked ready to dismiss whatever came next, until a single perfectly measured line from Crockett cut through the chamber like a shard of light. His posture faltered, his eyes shifted. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but enough to ripple through the room. Gasps, stillness, a collective inhale from an audience sensing a shift they couldn't yet explain. But the moment that shifted everything hadn't even happened yet. Long before the chamber filled with the restless shuffle of staffers and the sharp glare of television lights, pressure had been building like a storm no one could outrun. This hearing wasn't just another political skirmish. It was the latest collision point in a national struggle over dignity, identity, and the power to define truth in a country increasingly split between those who weaponize narrative and those who fight to reclaim it. People tuning in weren't looking for policy breakdowns or procedural recitations. They were waiting for fireworks, for a moment that would cut through the noise and reveal something raw and unmistakably human. Jasmine Crockett walked into that room with the weight of 1,000 unseen stories behind her, the kind carried by every immigrant family, every working parent, every young person told to shrink themselves to make others comfortable. Her testimony wasn't about scoring points. It was about defending the space to exist with pride, clarity, and purpose. That's why the audience leaned in. That's why every sentence she shaped felt bigger than the walls around her. And opposite her sat James Comer, a man known for his unbending posture and a rhetorical edge sharp enough to slice through most witnesses before they even settled into their seats. He wasn't someone easily swayed, and certainly not someone who arrived expecting to be impressed. His followers admired that toughness, his critics braced for it. Either way, his presence added a live wire unpredictability to the moment. People watching at home had no idea they were seconds away from the most unexpected twist of the year. The tension wasn't just rising, it was coiling, gathering force, preparing to unleash something no one on either side was prepared to confront. In this dramatized account of the chamber's unfolding drama, James Comer entered the hearing not as a blank slate, but as a figure whose reputation preceded him like a shadow stretching across the floor. He was known for a questioning style that came fast, came hard, and rarely left room for hesitation. Supporters saw in him a kind of political gladiator, someone who stepped into every exchange prepared for battle, unafraid to challenge, unafraid to push. To them, his bluntness was refreshing, a break from the polished evasions of typical Washington dialogue. They admired his toughness, the way he pressed on without blinking, the way he refused to let witnesses coast through easy answers. Critics, however, viewed the same qualities through a harsher lens. They saw a confrontational edge that sometimes felt less like accountability and more like performance, a kind of unyielding posture that left little room for nuance or empathy. In their eyes, Comer wasn't just firm, he was immovable, a man so committed to his stance that he often seemed impervious to anything that might soften it. And as he settled into his chair that day, arms crossed and expression locked, it was clear he had arrived with that familiar sense of certainty. He wasn't here to be convinced. He wasn't here to be moved. He was here to interrogate. His posture said it all, shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes scanning the room with the focus of someone expecting resistance and preparing to bulldoze right through it. The chamber, buzzing with anticipation, seemed to tilt slightly around him, his presence a gravitational pull that shaped the dynamics of the moment before a single question had been posed. But what Comer didn't expect, what no one imagined as the hearing began to unfold, was the force of composure and clarity about to rise across from him. There was something in Jasmine Crockett's presence that didn't fit neatly into the confrontational rhythm he usually commanded. Something steadier, something sharper, something that refused to shrink beneath pressure. And as the first hints of her testimony began weaving through the air like an approaching storm, the stage was set for a collision neither side could have predicted. Yet, even the most unshakable personalities can be thrown off balance. And he was next. In this dramatized retelling of the moment, Jasmine Crockett didn't step into the chamber as just another public servant. She stepped in carrying the weight of every fight that had shaped her, every barrier she'd had to push through, every expectation she'd had to exceed. Her calmness wasn't an accident. It was a skill honed through years of navigating spaces where her identity, her intelligence, and her right to speak were tested again and again. Before politics, she had built her name in the legal arena, where emotions ran high and stakes ran higher, where clients leaned on her not just for counsel, but for courage. She had stood in crowded courtrooms, in cramped offices lit by flickering fluorescents, in community spaces where the air buzzed with frustration and hope in equal measure. Each moment taught her how to stay grounded, how to wield truth like a tool instead of a weapon, how to protect her voice without ever raising it. Her battles weren't just professional, they were deeply personal. Growing up in a world that often tried to shrink women like her, she learned early that surviving wasn't enough. She wanted to rise. She wanted to serve. She wanted to stand in rooms where decisions were made and ensure that people who looked like her, who struggled like her, who dreamed like her, would never again be spoken over or dismissed. That desire shaped her posture in every confrontation, firm but graceful, sharp but controlled, grounded in something much larger than ego or theatrics. She fought not for the spotlight, but for the people whose story she carried with her like invisible armor. And so, when she sat at that table, her demeanor radiated something rare, an unwavering confidence that didn't require volume, a steadiness that didn't need bravado. You could almost trace every hard-earned lesson etched across her expression: how to stay composed when challenged, how to remain precise under pressure, how to speak with the weight of lived experience rather than rehearsed talking points. And that composure created a presence that was impossible to ignore, and even harder to rattle. Every confrontation she had survived, every courtroom she had commanded, every moment she had spent defending dignity in the face of dismissal had prepared her for what was unfolding now. And while the chamber buzzed with tension and expectation, Crockett remained centered, eyes forward, words measured, purpose intact. And this was exactly why her next statement would hit Comer harder than anyone in the room realized. The temperature in the chamber rose the moment Jasmine Crockett leaned back in her chair and delivered her next point with the kind of measured precision that made every syllable feel intentional. She wasn't rushing, wasn't flinching, wasn't letting the tension swallow her. Her voice carried a steady rhythm, each sentence falling into place like pieces of a puzzle she had already solved long before entering the room. Across from her, James Comer kept his arms folded, one eyebrow arched in that familiar expression of hardened skepticism. He looked like someone waiting for a crack in her argument, a slip in confidence, a moment he could seize. But none came. Around them, the chamber pressed in tight with anticipation. A lawmaker shifted loudly in their seat, the scrape echoing across the space like a warning signal. A pair of spectators exchanged whispered commentary, their voices low but their excitement unmistakable. One staffer scribbled notes so quickly the paper beneath their pen began to curl at the edges, while a camera operator leaned in with a slow, deliberate zoom, framing the subtle tension building between the two figures at the center of it all. Another member let out a long, frustrated sigh that drifted through the air like static. The clash wasn't explosive, it was simmering, coiling, tightening with each deliberate exchange. Comer's skepticism sharpened, his posture stiffening as he searched for flaws she refused to offer. Crockett, by contrast, seemed anchored, her calm confidence forming a stark contrast to the restless energy gathering around her. One side was rattled whether they admitted it or not. The other was unshakable. The chamber felt suspended in that contrast, as if everyone present sensed they were inching toward a moment that would redefine the entire encounter. Crockett's poise became its own kind of pressure, a quiet force challenging the heated posture across from her. And as the murmurs swelled, as eyes darted between the two, as the electric stillness settled over the room like a held breath, the real turning point was already forming on her lips. But it was her calmness line, not her loudest, that would finally break through his wall. She began the next stretch of her testimony with a deliberate stillness, as if the entire room needed a moment to steady itself before she delivered what came next. Jasmine Crockett knew the weight of silence, the power of pacing, the impact of letting the truth form slowly rather than flooding the chamber all at once. So she spoke in a rhythm that felt almost orchestral. Pause. Evidence. Pause. Moral framing. Pause. Each beat landing with the precision of someone who had mastered not only the arguments, but the art of delivering them. Documents slid across the table with quiet confidence, dates matched, facts aligned, contradictions dissolved under the clarity of her cadence. Comer watched, arms still folded at first, his expression locked in its familiar armor. But even from a distance, it was clear something subtle had begun to shift. His eyes followed each document more closely than before, his head tilting ever so slightly when she drew a connection that cut through the noise with surgical clarity. He wasn't conceding, no, not even close, but he was listening, really listening, in a way that suggested Crockett's calm command of the moment had slipped past his defenses. The chamber sensed it too. The murmurs quieted, the air tightened. A staffer in the second row stopped mid-whisper, leaning forward as if afraid to miss the next sentence. A staffer paused their frantic note-taking, pen hovering over the page. One lawmaker exchanged a wide-eyed glance with another, their expressions saying everything their protocol wouldn't allow them to voice. And then came the moment when a camera operator, sensing the shift before anyone else dared to acknowledge it, zoomed in on Comer with slow precision, framing his reaction like the centerpiece of a political drama. Crockett continued, unaware, or perhaps fully aware, of the ripple effect her words were creating. She spoke of fairness, of truth, of the responsibility leaders carry when their voices shape the lives of people far beyond the chamber's walls. She framed her testimony not as a counterpunch, but as a reminder, a grounding force pulling the conversation back to what mattered. And just as the chamber began to settle into the cadence of her message, she delivered the line that cut through every barrier, every expectation, every preconception that had been guiding the moment until now. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fiery, it wasn't draped in theatrics. It was simple, clear, and disarmingly human, a truth that made even her sharpest critics pause. Comer's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in consideration. His head tilted again, this time with a trace of curiosity. There was no mistaking it. The line had reached him. On social media, reactions would later erupt like fireworks. Imagine posts formed in real time. Wait, did Comer just lean in? Crockett's got him thinking. This is history in the making. In the chamber, the impact was even more immediate. Someone gasped. Another member muttered something unintelligible under their breath. A pair of aides glanced at each other with matching expressions of disbelief. The silence following her line was thick enough to feel. Crockett finished her point with the same steady cadence that had carried her through the entire exchange. She didn't gloat, she didn't push. She simply let the truth sit in the center of the room, unchallenged, unshakable. And Comer, once rigid, once immovable, found himself visibly processing, his expressions shifting into something rare for him: respect, however reluctant, however quiet. The chamber held its breath. He cleared his throat before any words emerged, the small sound echoing through the chamber in a way no one expected. A few heads lifted, pens frozen mid-sentence. Comer's posture, once locked into defiance, loosened as one hand drifted from his chest to the cable. It wasn't surrender, but it was a shift, a recognition that something in Crockett's testimony had reached him. The silence that followed carried a different charge, the kind that comes when assumptions begin to crack. Comer had built his identity on challenging and resisting. He wasn't someone who yielded easily, and certainly not someone who offered validation without cause. Yet now he leaned forward, elbows settling near the documents she had laid out, as though proximity might offer clarity he suddenly sought. Around the chamber, the shift spread. A staffer blinked hard, stunned by the break in rhythm. A lawmaker straightened in their chair. Even the cameras seemed to hold still, lenses fixed on a man caught between habit and reconsideration. Crockett continued, waiting with the steadiness that had defined her from the beginning, the quiet confidence of someone who trusted the weight of her truth. The room braced itself for what he would say next. But the real shock came after she finished, when Comer finally spoke. As Comer's unexpected shift rippled through the chamber, a low murmur swept across the room, carrying disbelief from row to row. Lawmakers exchanged puzzled glances, unsure whether they had truly witnessed the break in his composure. Staffers leaned toward one another, whispering guesses, while a camera operator zoomed in with instinctive precision. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation, every eye drawn to the tension still humming between Crockett's steady presence and Comer's altered posture that afternoon. Outside the chamber, reactions erupted even faster. Social media timelines burst into motion, flooded with posts capturing collective shock. Comer just nodded. Crockett took his breath away. Reaction videos multiplied, each replaying the instant his posture softened. Memes followed within minutes, freezing his expression mid-thought, with captions that turned the moment into digital folklore. Commentators rushed online, offering rapid-fire analyses that framed the exchange as a rare crack in Washington's usual wall of performative certainty. Across the political spectrum, viewers felt the tremor. Supporters of Crockett celebrated the poise she carried into the confrontation, flooding feeds with admiration and pride. Even some opponents found themselves acknowledging the unmistakable authority in her delivery. Celebrities added their voices, applauding her clarity and discipline. News networks replayed the clip repeatedly, slowing it down to highlight the exact instant the shift occurred, framing the moment as one unexpected turn of the season this year. For many watching from home, the moment struck a chord deeper than political rivalry. It felt like vindication, proof that dignity, delivered calmly and confidently, could still command a room saturated with conflict. Families replayed the clip together, pointing out the subtle shift in Comer's expression. Friends sent the video across group chats with stunned emojis. Even fatigued viewers, numbed by division, felt something stir as they witnessed a rare pause in the cycle of confrontation. The emotional resonance extended far beyond partisan lines. People who rarely agreed on anything found themselves sharing the same clip, the same disbelief, the same flicker of hope. For children of immigrants, for those navigating identity with quiet determination, Crockett's poise felt like representation finally given the stage it deserved. Her strength didn't shout, it radiated, and audiences across the country held on to that glow, sensing that the moment carried more weight than anyone expected. Yet despite the digital storm flooding every screen, the most powerful impact wasn't found online. It lived in the quiet moment that followed, now. In the quiet that settled after the storm of reactions, something deeper took hold, an understanding that moments like this are rare, fragile, and profoundly revealing. Crockett's calm truth-telling had pierced through the hardened rituals of confrontation, reminding everyone watching that sincerity still carries a force unmatched by volume. What unfolded wasn't a victory for one side or a defeat for another. It was a revelation of how powerful dignity becomes when placed against hostility. Comer's unexpected shift didn't erase the differences between them, but it confirmed something audiences often fear has vanished from public life: the capacity to listen when truth demands attention. For a brief moment, the chamber felt less like a battlefield and more like a crossroads where values, real, foundational American values, quietly reasserted themselves. Integrity, respect, and courage rose above the noise, carried not by theatrics, but by the steady voice of someone who understood the stakes far beyond political sparring. Viewers across the country felt that shift, sensing that they were witnessing something rare, a glimpse of political humanity breaking through hardened lines. Crockett's composure became a symbol of what leadership can look like when grounded not in ego, but in service, not in spectacle, but in truth. And Comer's moment of respect, however subtle, offered proof that acknowledgement does not weaken a person's position. It strengthens the possibilities of dialogue. What their exchange created was a reminder that even in an age defined by division, clarity still has the power to stop a room and recalibrate its spirit. And as the echoes of the moment lingered, one truth rose above the rest, steady and undeniable. In a world of noise, dignity still cuts through. People who had felt unseen or dismissed found themselves standing a little taller, recognizing in Crockett's steadiness a mirror of their own resilience and a reminder that their stories deserved not just space, but genuine respect from those in power. And in that quiet recognition, viewers sensed a path forward, one where courage reshaped conversations, where honesty softened barriers, and where the simple act of listening became a radical, unifying force across every divide today. Moments like the one we just witnessed are why this story carries the title it does, because none of us expected respect to break through the tension, and yet it did, reshaping the chamber and leaving everyone stunned. It's a reminder that truth matters, courage matters, and sometimes respect emerges from the most unlikely corners, proving that integrity can still rise above the noise. If this moment moved you, if it reminded you of the power of dignity in a world that often forgets it, then stay with us, subscribe, share this video, and help grow a community committed to conversations that uplift rather than divide. Your voice adds strength to the movement. Your presence amplifies the message, and together we ensure stories like this one continue to inspire, empower, and remind us of what's still possible when we leave with courage and clarity. We rise together toward a brighter tomorrow.